Dear respected Thay, dear brothers and sisters, dear noble community, good morning. Today is the 25th of April 2015, and we are on the second to the last day of the OI Retreat at Blue Cliff Monastery. Today, Joanne and I were asked to share about continuing beautifully in the world. And for my part, I'd like to say up front that I'm lifting my sharing completely from my Dharma discussion group. Our group is Right View, so you can rest assured that everything that I say is from Right View. So we're all good. Can I ask if you're in the Right View group to just please raise your hand? Okay, so everything that I'm sharing is from the collective insight and experiences from our friends here. And we also know that in the Noble Eightfold Path, Right View, along with all the 7 other aspects of the path, inter-are. So this sharing is actually a sharing from all of us. One of the things that was shared in our Dharma sharing group yesterday that opened up my eyes was a definition of right view. And one of our friends said, right view is the being open to all possibilities. I thought that was very beautiful. It struck me as true right away. Just another way of tasting what right view might be, is that freedom, that feeling of openness to receive whatever is or whatever may be. So I just want to keep that in mind as we go forward. So continuing beautifully in the world, I think that's a very relevant topic for OI, because many of us, well, there are many ages in the order. There are many of us who have just started. There are some of us who are kind of in the middle, a few years in, maybe even a decade in, even 20 years in. And the challenge in being in OI, and in general in the challenge of being a practitioner, is how to keep that alive. So when we think of continuing, what we're really saying, how can we fully live our practice life? Fully have the practice as part of our life, fully have our life as part of our practice. And only in that way can we really, truly continue. So there's something about it being prospering, flourishing, dynamic, alive, and relevant that makes a continuation worth continuing. Otherwise, it's like you inherit something from your mom or dad or your grandparents that you might not really have a connection with, but you carry it around with you anyway. It's not alive for you. It's not meaningful or relevant to you. So how do we make our practice or our involvement in OI meaningful and alive? Before we speak about bringing the practice, bringing the Dharma out into the world, it has to be something that's like a fire that continues to burn and transform in our own lives, right? So this is the aspects that I will be sharing about, and then I'll leave the harder part to Joanne, the engaged part. Okay. So luckily we're coming out of the chant, so we can use that line right here. Ill-being, the causes of ill-being, the end of ill-being, the path. That's the Four Noble Truths in a nutshell. Insight and attainment are also not separate self-entities. Okay? So, in order to make our practice relevant, it has to have something to do with the Four Noble Truths. Meaning, we have to be continually in touch with our suffering as well as the path out of our suffering in order for our practice to mean anything to us and for us to affect change. So let's take a walk down memory lane. This is what we did in our Dharma sharing group. I'm going to ask you a few questions. And you can raise your hand if you want, if you'd like to share with the group or just to kind of chew on it inside. Do you remember why you first came to the practice? Most of us are motivated by some sort of dissatisfaction in our life, whether it's mild or it's quite strong, a strong suffering. But do you remember, I'm asking especially for our older members in the OI, do you remember what it was or what were those elements of suffering, the first noble truth, the ill-being, that brought you to our practice? Or brought you to the Sangha, brought you to a retreat, brought you to a public talk, brought you to a book of Thais? Yes. Profound anxiety. Yes, Janie? Disconnect, feelings of separation. Mm-hmm. How about a gentleman, not to discriminate, but yes. Family violence. Refuge from family violence. One more? Yes. Relief from alcoholism. Okay. So it's very fresh for some of us, this, what brought us. And it's good that we are able to name it. We shared that there are different experiences in coming to the practice. Some of us come right from with the reason of escaping that suffering. Some of us are already in that place of joy, of Dharma engagement, Dharma investigation, and we're nourished and we continue to seek that nourishment. So first of all, that's the first thing to keep in mind. Are we aware of the roots of our practice, meaning the First Noble Truth? What brought us here? My second question is, right now, after 3 years, 5 years, 10 years of practice, looking back at that noble truth of yours, that First Noble Truth of yours, how are you in relation to that suffering now? What kind of space, energy, and time does that suffering occupy in your life now? Because if we are practicing in a relevant way, if we are applying, engaging our mindfulness where it really matters, then our mind's eye will be able to see changes, although it may be very small, but we will be attentive and aware and actually use that as nourishment for our practice. So just take a kind of minute to reflect where we're at with that awareness. Where are you at with that suffering of anxiety, of isolation, of addiction? And also to acknowledge maybe if this isn't a question that has been foremost in your mind, just to take note of it, to reflect on perhaps later. It's okay too. And the third question is knowing where we are now and where we, quote unquote, started from. Are we aware of the evolution of our heart, our mind? that has got us from point A to point D, point F, point G. Meaning the mindfulness practice doesn't just start at point A and awaken at point D. It means every step of the way, when there have been changes, setbacks, new challenges, our mindfulness has caught it. It's been part of the practice. Our life has been part of the practice. So, are we aware of how the body of this snake of suffering, are we aware of the body, the evolution of it? And lastly, to step a little bit into the engaged part, now with our different relationship with that suffering, with that First Noble Truth, as we have been practicing to recognize it, to recognize the conditions behind it, to recognize that there is a path, and then to walk that path, the Noble Eightfold Path. How is our practice, our embodiment of our practice, our life now, our view now, how is it impacting those around us, the lives around us? Our suffering that we had such difficulty with, if there was in any way that we are able to help someone avoid that suffering, are we able to realize that? Have we been able to take that step to extend that care, that bodhisattva ideal out to help others? So what is the extent of our sphere? It's the fourth question. This is an easy talk because I get to ask questions and not do anything. This is great. Okay, last question is the present moment, always coming back to the present moment. What is your First Noble Truth now, in the present moment? Or for most of us, what are your multiple Noble Truths, First Noble Truths of the present moment? And how does that relate to the first one that brought you so fiercely, so with such urgency to the practice? All these questions are to help us see the roots, the trunk, the branches, and the flowering of our mindful living, or lack thereof. And hopefully this is to give us incentive to look more concretely at the smaller steps when we talk about keeping our bodhicitta alive, keeping our practice relevant to us. Okay? So grounding ourselves in the Noble Truths helps to keep our practice from being blasé. Right? Who wants to bring blasé into the world? Nobody. Right? We want it to be something meaningful, heart-filled for others, to invite them to the practice, right? In order to do that, we have to embody that. Okay. In our Dharma sharing group, there are many different experiences. When we were talking about the Noble Truths, several people shared that suffering will happen anyway, whether you want it to or not. That's a truth in and of itself. And also that suffering will happen anyway, whether you're aware of it or not, right? And I can add that perhaps this is a truth, that the suffering that we experience without awareness is actually a worse suffering because it sows negative seeds. The karma for it is longer lasting because we're not encompassing it, enveloping it in the embrace of our practice. So it's not just a horse, it's a wild horse run amok in a china shop next to a bull and an elephant. It's a big mess. So, yeah, I just lost my train of thought with that. Yeah, so it happens. So that's one of the things that we may observe as longtime practitioners. But how do we continue to relate with this ongoing suffering? How is our mind able to come back to more quickly and more to an equanimous space when we touch, there's that big suffering, there's that small suffering. How quickly can we come back to it in a place of equanimity? Another thing we may observe about our suffering is that it evolves. It's a continual process of reconnection with it if we are practicing correctly. Because as we all know, the suffering that comes from outside isn't wholly from outside. It's touching a sensitivity inside, a wound that's already there, that we've inherited, that we've created from our own conditions. So when enough conditions are ripe outside, it pushes those buttons. Okay. So as practitioners, we know that suffering is not just one thing, it's a very dynamic, organic matter in our life, and that's the good news. Okay, so we've talked about how not to keep our practice from sliding into blah, 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 blasé. Now, I'd like to focus on how we can keep our practice as a vehicle for transformation. And this was, I think, the brunt of our sharing from yesterday, the Right View group. It happens from time to time that we get stuck in the practice. You can call it complacency or lack of direction or lack of interest. That's the blasé part. And I'm going to share some ways that stuckness manifests and see if you can identify with this. Because honestly, we are not perfect practitioners, so we will touch these from time to time. And it's good to acknowledge this. So sometimes we do good for others, especially as a member of a community that's a spiritual community whose stated goal is engaged Buddhism, engaged practice, reaching out, outreach. Have you ever felt like you were doing good, taking care of things for your local sangha, taking care of things for your family, for others, but at the same time, you weren't being nourished. You were feeling actually malnourished. You were feeling like time, energy, your best interests were being sacrificed. You don't have the time to look deeply and connect with the work, the Dharma work you're doing. Does that ring a bell for anyone? Or do you? Okay, yeah. We may be in that space, we may have been in that space, or we may know someone, our loved one, who's in that space. So that we would call that person a Dharma do-gooder. They do good, they do well by others, but they're malnourished. So that's being kind of stuck in the practice. Or we may be very reliant on the form of the practice. Some of our friends shared about this too. Attending regularly the Sangha, attending regularly the sits, relying on the structure, but somehow not being able to touch a deeper transformation. And we'll talk a little bit later about the difference between relying on structure for nourishment and healing and transformation, and just relying on structure to escape. Does that ring a bell? In the monastery, we also have that danger. We have a schedule set out for us. In local sanghas, we have a regular sit, walk, sit, discussion, book read, and it can become quite rote. It's something that it becomes part of our schedule, but it has no life. Meaning we don't come away feeling refreshed, open, more open, wanting to share our experience with others. If your local sangha has a regular attendance, that's very affirming. But we shouldn't just rest there. We should actively ask our sangha members who are coming what it is that's bringing them to the practice. Because it could be that they're finding a kind of superficial or very temporary refuge at that space and time, but it's not going more deeply. And as facilitators, as OI members, that's our responsibility to waken up and keep alive the spirit of the practice, so that people come back, not because that's better than going to a movie on Friday night, but they come back really because they're growing, they're learning, they're transforming. So ask your members. And if you see that in your sangha, that the numbers are starting to dwindle, that's a wake-up call too. That's a real bell of mindfulness. It requires a kind of humility to ask of ourselves, what is it that we can do better? What is it that we can change a little bit, even maybe just a little bit, in order to make that space more relevant to the people that we are reaching out to? Okay? So these are questions for us to assess ourselves, the health of our practice life as a community, the health of our practice life as individuals in a community. So we have folks who are caught in form from time to time. We have folks who do well by others but not by themselves. And then we also talked about using the practice to escape, and we have Joanne to thank for that, because she brought this up in her sharing in the panel presentation 2 days ago. It's a couple, timeless. It's 2 days ago, I think it was. In the panel sharing about mentoring, that her observation was that sometimes people do use the practice as an escape. So we explored that in our sharing group, what that's about. So I'm going to write down a few dichotomies for us to explore more deeply with regard to Dharma practice as an escape, as a way of avoiding. Okay. So now we come back to the Four Noble Truths. The first aspect about grounding was that we keep alive the awareness of the Four Noble Truths in our practice life. That's the most important thing when we talk about grounding our practice. Now, when we talk about making our practice a vehicle for transformation, the most important thing about that is that not only do we keep the Noble Truths well and alive in our practice life, but we keep alive the awareness of the interrelationship of the elements of the Four Noble Truths. So I'm going to go out on a limb and do a very surface interpretation of it not being a separate self-entity. In the Heart Sutra, it's stated over and over again that everything is empty of a separate self-entity. First we talk about the body, just the body itself, not being something disembodied. Then we talk about the 18 realms of phenomena, and we talk about the Four Noble Truths in relationship to everything else. But what I'd like to focus on is its interrelationship with one another. So to make it easy, what we're talking about is our ill-being and our well-being, the first Noble Truth and the third Noble Truth. Tay often says that our suffering and our happiness, they inter-are. This is another way of saying that. And if we don't keep alive this awareness and train our mind to live this insight, it's very easy to use the Dharma practice as an escape. We'll put that aside and just focus on that. Okay? So, aware of the Noble Truths and aware of how they interrelate. When we focus on our joy and nourishment, it doesn't mean that we are neglecting our suffering. When we put time to take care of our suffering, it doesn't mean we are having a pity party for ourselves. If we have the right view of interbeing of the Four Noble Truths, right? Okay, so what we talked about was that feeling of using our time to go to Sangha, sittings, retreats, and feeling nourished, but at the same time feeling a little bit like it was an escape. Because you leave the house, you leave the difficulty, you leave the difficult conversations behind, you leave behind the responsibilities. Why? So you can escape them. That's why. That's the answer of a non-practitioner. And as a non-practitioner, that person would go out maybe to a bar, to a movie, to go complain on the phone, right? As practitioners, we might do the same thing, but we do that mindfully, right? But even better, we have more wholesome choices that we conscientiously partake. And that's where, as our sister shared, what we're doing is we're reinterpreting with mindfulness practice that kind of habit of touching the Dharma, practicing the Dharma becomes, instead of escape, it becomes a refuge. And let's explore that a little bit more carefully. When you come to Blue Cliff, are you escaping or are you taking refuge? And what's the difference between the two? Would anyone like to volunteer some insights on that? What's the difference between the two? Not Judy, someone else. What's the difference between the two for you, between escaping and taking? Celia? Running away from something versus stopping and coming home, resting and being held. Okay, anyone else? Yes, Marty. So the things that we're running away from, when we're trying to escape from, when we take refuge, we are mindful that they may still be with us, in us, but we are holding them more gently in a different way. Very nice. Okay, I think that's a very comprehensive answer. I think Celia and Marty stole all the answers, so we continue. So to sum up, the refuge, there's a feeling of stopping. That sounds familiar, right? That's part of our practice of stopping. And there's a feeling of safety. Whereas in avoiding and escaping, there's a feeling of fear, anxiety. It's not the joy of leaving behind that we often hear of. There's no end. It's just a continual movement. If you're afraid of me and I come close to you, you move, and then if I come close to you, you move, right? But in refuge, there's a real space and place in ourselves to be able to stop. Okay. We also talked about distraction. So here, let's revisit the practice of changing pegs. How many of you have heard that term before? Right, all of us are carpenters, we all know what that means. Right? So it means to whack out the old rotten peg with a new peg. And what it means in terms of our practice is if there's a negative situation, a negative experience, a negative emotion, a difficulty that's too difficult for us to face squarely and transform it right away, we change the peg, meaning we change our focus and we touch something more nourishing for us. Some of us may go out to nature, literally leaving behind the mess and going and touching nature to nourish ourselves. So when is distraction, meaning we don't want to face that, so because it's too much for us. And it's true, sometimes our suffering is too much, and there's nothing wrong with acknowledging when suffering is too much. The practice is to just acknowledge what is. That's what it is, so it's too much, right? Unwise would be to push beyond our capacity. So at what point does nature, cavorting in nature with the birds and the trees, become no longer a nourishment, but a distraction? Any thoughts on that? Yes. Connecting, so when it's not helping us to connect with something inside, but again, coming back to the idea that it's an escape. Okay? Anyone else? Yes. That feeling of running. The quality of looking outside of ourselves and always running. One last? Yes. That's the best answer. Yes. Good. So we're going to keep on coming back to that part. So there's something to do with the intention. Yes, I'm sorry, I was just caught by the answer. So our friend said that when there's mindfulness involved in the act of being nourished, and we'll come back to that because it has to do with intention, awareness. Okay. We also talked about feeling more disconnected when we're practicing rather than connected. an example of being more with our Dharma friends or more with the practice, and less with our family was given. Terry is very clear about this. In so many different ways he's shared about the importance of our humanity as the means, the end of our practice. When he speaks about sisterhood and brotherhood being the highest priority in our practice, that's another way of sharing about how we prioritize our focus in our practice. So if we are using our practice in order to connect again, to understand and reconnect with our loved ones, even if it's solo time, then we know that it's in the light of engaged practice, engaged Buddhism. If we feel that we're finding relief, but it has nothing to do with our more mindful speech, our capacity to listen more deeply to those difficult to listen to things with our sister, our brother, our mom, our dad, our child, then we know we're going in the opposite direction, the wrong direction, okay? And so what does that mean? If we see that we're touching these flavors, then it's a wake-up call. It asks for us to stop and reassess how we are practicing, what we are prioritizing, how holistic we are being in our view of our practice. Okay, we also talked about using the practice of meditation, concentration, and how that it can also be a way of escape. So when we practice and we are able to focus in our meditation, we are taught to choose an object of meditation. Most of the time it's our breath to begin with, right? So that's our object of meditation. We keep in our inner eye that awareness of the breath as it's changing, as it's evolving, and we don't allow our mind to get caught by other things. If they are pulled away, we bring it back. If we forget our breath and we remember again, we simply bring it back, and that's how we grow our concentration. But concentration is with other things. It doesn't sit by itself. So concentration, samadhi, it leads to wisdom, and it's fed by mindfulness. So if we are sitting and we feel that there's a relief, but then when we come out of it, as it was shared, and we again face the same issue, then it's an invitation to reconnect with the flow of this process. Concentration narrows our focus so that we're not distracted by, or not dispersed. But when our focus is narrowed, it allows us, if we give it the conditions, to go deeper into that object of meditation, right? So we don't just rest there in order not to be distracted. We rest there in order for insight to grow. So as the breath changes, or as we observe nature, or as we have the reality, the perceived reality of our loved one in our mind's eye, and in concentration we continue to focus on them, it gives rise to insight. It gives rise to a deeper understanding of why our loved one always says that to us in that way when they should know better, right? So in that way, if we from a holistic space see samadhi as a means to prajna, then it keeps us from becoming using it as an escape. It's a vehicle for transformation. And finally, it was a very rich Dharma sharing, so I'm very happy that all these things came up. We talked about the Sangha being one of the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, as a container, especially when we first come to the Sangha, when we first experience the beauty of a monolithic, faceless, but very peaceful and powerfully present Sangha, we feel that that's a place to take refuge. That's a place to let go of things and just trust in the community's capacity to help soothe things, to help us transform things. We're in a way borrowing from the energy, or maybe a better word is we're tapping into that energy and allowing it to re-energize us, innervate, is that word? Innervate? Awaken things in us. Energize, yeah, like from the inside out, but we're taking that from outside in. And in that way, we haven't yet fully embodied the practice yet. But how do we transform that container into a fabric of which we're a part? So the image that I'd like to share is that the net of Indra, which it's a vast net, and every single one of us is a node in the net. And we are the fabric. We are also the jewel of that net, reflecting all the capacities and potentials of every other person in that Sangha, in the cosmos. How do we transform our relationship? Maybe at the beginning we came from a place of deep need to just simply lay our burdens down and take refuge. But how do we grow our relationship? Meaning, how do we strengthen our practice so that we become that fabric? What is OI if not a net? OI, I liked what my brother said the other day. I think he said something about it. Brother Vu said, it's not like a club med or something like that. OI, club OI. I mean, what makes us as a community different from something we pay dues to and belong to and receive benefit from? It has to be our own interbeing with the order, right? So let us again revisit that feeling that we had when we came to OI and where we're at now. How much of the fabric, how much of a part of the fabric do we feel now? Has that changed any? And why or why not? The more we become the fabric, the more, of course, the stronger our practice, the less we have a habit of using Dharma activities, OI activities, organizing, etc., as means to escape. Because in every moment, in every aspect of our involvement with the order, we are practicing. We are no longer using our time in order to run away from the real difficulties at home. OI becomes our home. OI becomes our difficulties. And OI also becomes our avenue of transformation. Right? So lastly, just to give us a few ideas of what the flavor. Oh yes, thank you. That would be nice. Okay, it's 11 o'clock, so I will just wrap up real quick. To give us a flavor of of right view when it comes to our practice. We should have a holistic approach to our suffering and our well-being. When we touch our suffering, we also aware to some extent its relationship to our well-being. And when we engage in things that nourish us, then it should have something to do. It should bring us closer to our suffering, meaning closer in understanding it, so that when we come back conscientiously to the suffering, to the ill-being, we have more energy. We don't feel depleted. We don't feel like, oh no, because we haven't been having this relationship with it, but we've been actively nourishing ourselves to fortify ourselves, to come back. So we should have a reservoir. So the flavor of an intentional practice that has something to do with our life is that there is intention and awareness in our actions. We are no longer reacting to things, but we are acting. Even when we are reacting, we are acting. And that's the key element that our friend was sharing about, mindfulness in each moment. One of our friends shared very beautifully in sharing that her practice has evolved in her work, where it's become less of a things to do, get things done, busyness, and more of a moment-to-moment unfolding of practice, a learning, an avenue to learn. And all the elements that we talk about in the 5 mindfulness trainings are there in that space of work. And in our nourishment, when we turn away from the suffering and nourish ourselves with other things, there should be the quality of moderation, appropriateness in time and space. And here what I'm getting at is sometimes Dharma work can be addictive. Just like any addiction, when we turn to something else that's more fun, easier to do, more validating, an easy fix, it can become like an addiction. And we are able to recognize an addiction by the fact that there's no moderation in the engagement, and it's not so appropriate in time and space. So if we take a look at our life and see that we are doing OI stuff, practicing, but there's a disconnect, there's a compulsion, there's a grasping, there's a ignoring the physical, the bodily needs of ourselves, this is a real bell of mindfulness. So thank you for your patience, and I apologize to Joanne. I hope we do have space to have a longer sharing, if possible, to have a shorter walking, to give space for Joanne to share. Thank you.
Dear respected Tay, dear brothers and sisters, it's wonderful to be able to be together. And I also feel like I'm so full. I really am so appreciative of my sister's generosity of putting all of that together so beautifully. And like I said, I'm feeling very full. I feel like I just want to sit with what's been said, basically. But you can't always get what you want. That's what Mick Jagger said. But what I would request would be that perhaps we have a few moments for stretching. I realize many of us have been here for an hour and a half now. So I think it would be good for us to be able to just have a moment to stretch, and then we'll continue. We're very good. Dear respected Thai, dear brothers and sisters, welcome back. I wanted to begin today just by reading something, an excerpt from one of Thai's poems. I think that it's a beautiful guideline for moving forward, for continuing beautifully together. He says, "Since the moon is full tonight, let us call upon the stars in prayer. The power of concentration, seen through the bright, one-pointed mind, is shaking the universe. All living beings are present tonight to witness the ocean of fear, flooding the earth. Upon the sound of the midnight bell, everyone in the 10 directions joins hands and enters the meditation on Mahakaruna. Compassion springs from the heart as pure, refreshing water, healing the wounds of life." And to me, this is a beautiful instruction. He states clearly the difficult situation we're living in. the difficult situation we've created or co-created. And he points to the way out. We're witness to the ocean of fear flooding the earth. And we're asked to join hands, enter into a meditation. Compassion springs from the heart as pure, refreshing water, healing the wounds of life. So, as Sister Tay has so beautifully illustrated for us, our practice is about really transforming and healing those habits of mind, the unwholesome habits of mind, those rotten pegs that the sister was referring to. From the patriarch of our order, Linchi, or our lineage, Master Linchi, he kept talking about the whole purpose of our practice is to be a free person. We need to transform and heal those places, those obstacles in us, so we can be free. And for me, that's the North Star, that I just keep focusing on, am I free or am I not? It's a dead giveaway. When I'm caught in my misperceptions, mental formations, stories that I've made up or that other people have told me, I am definitely not a free person. If I am getting motivated by my fears, if I am limited by my ideas of who I am, my notions and my concepts, I'm not free. So the thing I get so excited about in our practice is that we have very clear direction. We have been given every single thing we need to find our way to freedom, to transform and heal and become free people. We're always asked to look deeply in order to understand. And Tai says compassion springs from our heart, and that's where the healing happens. When he instructs us to look deeply in order to understand, what I have found is that it's impossible for me to get to a place of understanding without developing compassion. I have never yet really reached true understanding when compassion didn't happen. If I am looking deeply at somebody who hurt me badly, our instruction always is to look at myself. I have to start with myself to look at what is it that got watered in me, what is it that got triggered in me. And then we have all kinds of practices for sitting with that, embracing it wholeheartedly, taking good care of those places in ourselves and healing them. And what happens then, when I understand why I have developed so many unskillful habits, when I have developed such incredibly unskillful states of mind, all I need to do is look deeply enough to get to a point of understanding. And I have nothing but compassion. I have never met anybody who had a habit for no reason. We have all developed habits for really good reasons. And when we can come to the root, the cause of the suffering, there's nothing but compassion. It's impossible to get to anything but compassion. If I then look at the person who was hurting me, and I still feel a knot of resentment, what I know is I haven't looked deeply enough. All I need to do is continue looking. If I have not gotten to compassion, I have definitely not understood. That's exactly, it's a litmus test that works every time. Whenever I can really look deeply enough to understand, there's nothing but compassion. I used to really focus on forgiveness, to look back and try my best to forgive myself, forgive other people. And now that I've been practicing what Tai has taught me, I feel like there's no need for forgiveness at all, because there's no blame, ever. It's just understanding. And understanding, he teaches us, is the basis of love. That when we get to that place of understanding, we feel nothing but compassion, and we feel nothing but love for ourselves and everybody. It's so wonderful. And I love the fact that in our tradition, even the children, the two promises they make, one is, I vow to develop understanding. So right from the get-go, they're being taught to do that. I'm going to try to be as brief as I can, so you can have a walk today. But I did want to share some questions. I know my sister shared some questions. I would like to share some also. These are 4 questions that I always use when I feel stuck. The first question is one that was given to me by Tai. It's been given to all of us, and that is, are you sure? When Sister Tay was talking about our attachment to views and coming to right view, I find that that question is the quickest way to get not attached to my view, to get loosened up from my view. Are you sure? There is, to me, incredible freedom in that question. We have been powerfully conditioned to feel like we should know everything, we should be sure, we need to have the right answer, there's a right answer, a wrong answer, we need to know what it is. And as soon as we get to be real comfortable with the fact that we don't have a clue, the happier we are. Then there's infinite possibilities. Then it opens up the door for anything to be able to happen. And that's exactly the situation that we're all living in all the time anyway. We just like to believe that's not true. You've mistaken me for somebody that's out of control. Yep. I'm not mistaken. Because if we think we are in control, we're really delusional. So the only thing we have any control over is how we practice, is how we respond to life. Whatever gets sent our way. The next question is, what am I afraid of? And that is a good door for me. There's a quote that I wanted to read. This one. It says, there are 2 basic motivating forces, fear and love. When we are afraid, we pull back from life. When we are in love, we open to all that life has to offer with passion, excitement, and acceptance. We need to learn to love ourselves first in all our glory and imperfections. If we cannot love ourselves, we cannot fully open to our ability to love others or our potential to create. Evolution and all hopes for a better world rest in the fearlessness and open-hearted vision of people who embrace life. And who might that be? It's John Lennon. Sounds like Tai, doesn't it? Yeah. But I just love it. It's the world, for all hopes for a better world rest in the fearlessness and open-hearted vision of people who embrace life. So when we ask, what are we afraid of? That's why. We need to develop our courage. We need to develop fearlessness. The other thing that I just wanted to say about fear, this is where I feel we get stuck in those places that Sister was looking at in terms of where we go to escape, all those escapes. The motivation usually is fear. Fear is what makes us want to escape. Somebody mentioned yesterday in the panel discussion that everybody's afraid of resolving conflicts, that scares people. That's why we have practices to help us to feel fearless about doing that. We need to be able to resolve all conflicts, however small, and develop our courage. In our 8th training, our 8th mindfulness training, it says we will not behave as a victim, but be active in finding ways to reconcile and resolve all conflicts, however small. So here we have to confront our fear. And so what we have are practices that help us to create safe containers and a structure where we can offer flower watering, appreciations, beneficial regret, all those things that help us to feel safe. It helps us to develop intimacy rather than separation. in places that really scare us. And this is another thing that I am so grateful to Thai for. Because our practice evolved from the war, and he had to look at all the causes and conditions that led to war, what he found was it was us. That it's our hatred, anger, and violence that cause it. And what Gandhi said was, he said, we think that hatred is the enemy, but fear is the real enemy. Fear is what is behind the hatred. Shakespeare, I think it was, that said, if we fear something long enough, we grow to hate it. So fear, to me, is at the root of a whole lot of these difficulties that we run into in our practice. And fear, when we can embrace our fear and not run away from that, when we can when we can look deeply and understand that it's empty, almost always, then we're free. To me, that's one of the doors to freedom. What was it? Lao Tzu said, he who can see through fear will always be safe. And we feel safe. So what am I afraid of? The other reason that I talk a lot about fear is because it's dangerous. Number one, fear is what causes wars, and that creates a lot of killing. So it can be real dangerous. But I like to read a quote, and this is a quote by Hermann Goering, who was the second in command of the Third Reich. He says, "Why, of course the people don't want war. Why should some poor slob on a farm want to risk his life in a war when the best he can get out of it is to come back to his farm in one piece? Naturally, the common people don't want war, neither in Russia nor England, nor for that matter in Germany. That's understood. But after all, it is the leaders of the country who determine the policy, and it is always a simple matter to drag the people along. Whether it is a democracy, a fascist dictatorship, or a parliament, or a communist dictatorship, voice or no voice, the people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. That's easy. All you have to do is tell them they are being attacked and denounce the peacemakers for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same in any country." So when I read that, I thought, somehow or other, visions of Dick Cheney came to my mind. Why? Why did we go to war in Iraq? Because of fear, right? And the fear machine was really pumped up. Weapons of mass destruction. You're under attack. The World Trade Centers fell. We're under attack. We have to be very afraid. And when we're very afraid, we're very easily manipulated. So that's why I feel that fear is very dangerous. And for us to develop our ability to see through our fear, to be very aware, and fear takes all these different guises. I can hear people all the time make excuses for, I can't do that because I can't do that because of this, I can't do that. We have all different ways of hiding from our fear or calling it by some other name. When Thai says, "Call me by my true names," we need to call it by its true name. And what he tells us too is fear is the soil in which anger grows. So a lot of us who go quickly to anger, sit with the anger, look deeply, embrace it. And very often what you find underneath it is fear. And then often when we find what it is we're afraid of, what I find constantly in my own practice is that what I have spent forever trying to avoid, when I finally can embrace it, accept it, look at it squarely in the eye, it's nothing. Compared to the suffering that it's caused me to try to avoid it, it's nothing. There's nothing to it. So I've just wasted a whole lot of my time. The other question is, what am I attached to? Am I attached to my view? Am I attached to an outcome? I can't tell you how much suffering I've experienced, and people that I work with have experienced, by being attached to, I want to make sure nothing bad happens. I want to make sure all the people in my family are safe. I want to make sure nobody dies. I want to make sure it's a nice day because we're having a party. I want to make sure, right? I want to be in control of everything. Good luck. As the late great Chogyam Rinpoche, Trungpa Rinpoche once said, good luck. It's not going to happen. So what am I attached to? If we can look at that and loosen our grip, and sometimes the grip is fierce. I oftentimes, when I get really caught in the attachments, I feel like, I don't know if you remember, Charlton Heston used to be in advertisements for the NRA, and he said, I won't give up my gun, and you'll have to unclench my dead white fingers from my gun before I'll give it up. And I feel like when I get attached to something, it's like, yeah. It really is fierce. I don't know if any of you have ever had that experience, but I find that the energy can be quite strong. And then the last question I like to ask myself is this of any benefit? Is the way I am thinking about this of any benefit to myself or anybody else? And sadly, it often is not at all of any benefit. So the thing that brings me to always, one of the ways that I like to hold these questions too is that when things happen, I like to look at them from the perspective of impermanence. I know in our training on anger, impermanence is in that training. And Thai says when we're holding on to anger, look at the person we're angry at and imagine them 300 years from now. He invites us to remember impermanence, the impermanent nature of everything. Unbelievable how powerful that is. It's incredible. How many minutes do I want to spend? If I have limited number of minutes, how many do I want to spend? Now, I have had a number of things happen in my life that have taught me, have been very, very powerful teachers. One of the things that I see in myself and in others very often is that people have been victimized, that horrible things have been done to people, horrible things have happened. And I see many, many people who are caught in that place of being a victim, that it colors their perception of everything. If it's snowing, it's about them personally. The universe is doing it to them. No matter what. It's like our egos, or the egos do the same thing. That I heard Matthew Ricard, one of the Dalai Lama's monks, talk one time about when we're caught in our little ego-centered self, it's like being in a very tiny bubble and having all these arrows coming at you, and there's no place for them to go except directly to your heart. When you have finally recognized the emptiness of that and are able to live with the awareness of interbeing, of oneness, you can have a healthy relationship with the ego. Say, thanks so much for trying to save me from everything, but you can go on vacation. I appreciate the thought. You can go on vacation now. And when we can finally get into that spaciousness, it's like being in this infinite bubble, and the arrows have nowhere to go. They just fly by. We're not available to take them on. So the other question is, for me, and like I said, I've had plenty of experiences to deal with. I came to the practice. Sister Tay said, what brought you to the practice? I had a brain injury. I was in a car accident, had a brain injury. That's what brought me to the practice. I always say I came to the practice by accident, and it's true. And there was a lot of pain and suffering involved in that. And then I've been living with metastatic stage 4 cancer for the last 7 years. There is quite a bit of suffering available in that. And what came to me, the minute I got that diagnosis, I answered the phone, I was told that I had cancer, and the first thing I did was have these death scenes of, I just helped 2 friends die of breast cancer, so I knew what they looked like. And so I had these death scenes play through. That took about 2 minutes. And then I caught my breath. The breath is such a gift. It's so powerful. You know, science has now proved what Taya and the Buddha have taught us forever, that when we take a diaphragmatic breath, that we're massaging the vagus nerve. It's connected to the parasympathetic nervous system, calms us right down. It really does. It's such a gift. It's wonderful. So I breathed. I then did some metta for myself. And then I asked the question, are you sure? That first question. And in that first question, I was like, I have no idea what this means. Could mean anything. Could be death, could be nothing at all. I don't know. So why get all wound up about something I don't know anything about? What peace. In that very minute, it's like, I love not knowing. I haven't known for 7 years what's going to happen. It's so good. And I've enjoyed every minute that I possibly could of those 7 years. Impermanence. Wonderful teacher. That the next question that came to my mind is, if I have limited minutes, which I thought was so funny that I put if in front of it, if I have limited minutes on the planet, how many do I want to spend in fear? And the answer was 0. Absolutely. Then you really don't want to waste your time. Okay? What a tragedy that is. If, I'm going to die, so therefore I have to spend my whole life worrying about it. So I waste every one of my present moments when I could be enjoying all the wonders of life, truly taking them all in. All these gifts that we just get showered with, minute by minute, every single day. Totally miss the boat and be all wound up in, but what will happen? You know, I have so many friends. They're terrified. I never had children. I'm going to die alone. You have no idea how you're going to die. You know? I have friends that call me, next year I'm going to be turning 60. Good for you. Congratulations. Get over it. You know, it's like, wow, you don't know how lucky you are. Celebrate. Okay? This is the difference impermanence makes. The awareness of impermanence. It helps us to not get caught in petty things. It helps us to keep our eyes on the big picture. It helps us to do exactly what Tai is teaching us to do, to keep our appointment with life. Don't miss a minute of it. That's the deal. And I see people who complain, my Sangha, everything. And I can identify with them. I used to complain to my Dharma teacher when I first started practicing, the Sangha this, the Sangha. People are coming just for socializing. They're not transforming. They're not healing. You know? Oi. And my Dharma teacher has such patience. I'm in awe, really. And be that as it may, she would say, well, Joanne, maybe you just want to focus on your practice for the next month. Maybe you would just like to deepen your practice. Hint, hint, How about maybe you would just like to mind your own business? Maybe you'd like to take care of your own mental formations. And what I found out was when I did that, there was no problem in the Sangha. The problem was me. Okay, so I just want to also bring this around to, once we are aware of these practices, once we're aware of them, that doesn't mean that we're transformed. I had somebody at one retreat say, but I've had the insight and I keep doing it anyway. Yes. The insight is the very first step. I'm sorry to tell you, to give you bad news. Then it's to practice with the insight, to be mindful, to develop our mindfulness and concentration so we can see that habit arise as it does and we're not driven by it. That's the deal. Minute to minute to minute to minute practice. And somebody was talking about, I was very happy that we were able to be together on Earth Day. And I really look at our practice, every single bit of our practice, all the different practices are about developing, expanding our capacity for love and compassion for ourselves and everybody, to deepen our understanding. And everybody, when Tai says the environment is us, we talk about the environment as if it's some separate object somewhere. It's us. And for us to develop a deep love and respect for all of nature, of which we are a part. We're just one little cell in the big organism of the whole cosmos. So when we can get over ourselves, which I see as being a big part of our practice, to really get ourselves into our proper perspective, and that is the perspective of interbeing, of being one cell in the Sangha body, one drop in this great river of life, no beginning, no end. When we finally can practice from that place and live in that awareness, the freedom and joy of that awareness, we are making a definite impact on the collective. We are the collective. You know, Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed people can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. And what I see is that there are people that are very thoughtful and committed to wreaking havoc in the world. They're very, very determined and very committed. And they definitely have changed the world. I feel that those of us who are dedicated to being peace, to contributing that to the collective, need to be every bit as and more determined than that. I think that we need to definitely be 100% committed to deepening our practice, transforming and healing those places that we're stuck so we can be of some help. In terms of taking the practice into the world, how do we, when there is so much suffering, and when Tai talks about this ocean of fear flooding the earth, what do we do about that? We can fall into despair. That's real easy. That's the simple one. Or we can look deeply in order to understand and try to take effective action. We don't have to take action out of fear, anger, or hatred. We can take action out of love for the earth, out of love for each other, out of love for our great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren. But it's taken out of love, purely motivated by love. I wanted to offer, one of the sisters had requested that I offer personal experience. How do you do that? What are some possibilities for taking the practice into the world? And one thing that we just did, because the racism that's inherent in our country has been brought to the surface once again and become more and more obvious. I'm a chaplain at a local university, and the chaplains all got together. We were looking deeply at what could we do in response to something like that. And I shared that several years ago, another practitioner and I had offered a workshop for the American Friends Service Committee, and it was a workshop on deep listening where we had invited Palestinians and Israelis to be listened to. So we had 2 Palestinians, 2 Israelis, and they were invited to speak for 10 minutes about their experience of the problems in the Middle East, or their views about the problems in the Middle East. And with the understanding that the audience would be given instruction in deep listening, in listening purely to understand, and watching our own minds to see the opinions that arise, that's right, wrong, that's good, that's bad, to indicate that we've already made up our mind, that we're not open to taking in any new information. The audience is given instruction, and they are also given instruction that there will be no opportunity to discuss the topic afterwards, that the only discussion will be around listening, their experience of listening. And so we did that. Each person talked for 10 minutes, and at the end of each sharing, I invited a bell and offered a gatha about how all humans have experienced suffering, and all humans want to be free, and all humans want to be happy, and be free of suffering. invite the bell, and then go to the next person. And by the time we got to the third person sharing, was an Israeli man. And he said, I've been doing this for 25 years, and this feels weird. He said, we never get this far, there's not an argument happening. Just to be listened to. And we had a very wonderful discussion following that. So I shared this with the chaplains, and they thought that would be good to do with the students around racism. And so we invited 4 students of color to share their experience of discrimination and racism. And I thought we'd have a hard time finding students who would be willing to do that. They jumped. Everyone that I asked for, and all 4 agreed to come. And they were so happy that we were doing this. And so they shared for 10 minutes each about their experience. The audience was given same instruction. We had a very lovely, it was wonderful to hear the insights people had when they were watching their minds as they were listening. But the most wonderful part to me came from the students, that after the audience shared, I turned to them and I said, would you be willing to share your experience of being listened to? What has that been like for you? And they all said that it felt wonderful. But one young man said, you know, I always feel really anxious about sharing anything. I feel like I have to be very careful about every word I choose because of the stereotyping that happens. I don't want to perpetuate stereotyping. And he said, but tonight I felt completely free to just share whatever was in my heart because I felt so much love in this room. I didn't pay him to say that. I was so happy. I just thought, wow, this is great. That's exactly why we practice deep listening, cultivating the quality, because it's felt. Energetically, it's felt. The other thing that I just wanted to bring up briefly was that Thai, during that talk that we listened to, stimulated me to really be looking at how the Dharma is being translated in the West. When he mentioned that being Westerners and being, I'm going to definitely paraphrase him, and I apologize to Thai, but being Westerners, it would kind of make sense. Like I said, there's no habit that we have that isn't easily explained when we look at the conditioning, that it would make sense that we're interpreting the Dharma or mindfulness as being a tool or an instrument to achieve a goal, that it's all goal-oriented, just like us. And that would make sense, that we would be apt to do that. And we need to be mindful of not doing that. But what it also brought to my mind was the fact that how important it is, while we're looking deeply at our own conditioning, from our families, from our experience, our personal experience, to be really well aware of our cultural conditioning as well. How does that color our perception? And we think it's normal. We think our perception is normal because it's just the way it's always been. And when we stop and look at it, when he said that, it was really a light bulb for me to really stop and look at, wow, how have I been taking in the teachings through that lens that has been developed by the culture in which I live. I've had lots of I've had lots of people come to me about trying to develop discernment when it comes to sharing the practice. I was very sad at one of the retreats that I offered. Somebody came to me really feeling confused because somebody who was an order member had decided, they announced to their Sangha that there was nothing more for them to learn, even though they had not received authority to teach, and therefore would open their own Sangha for which they would charge membership and charge a lot of money for mentoring people. Another good example of how our conditioning can totally, the Buddha gave a teaching on catching a snake the wrong way. That's a perfect example, like way over the top. That's like reaching into a nest of snakes, I think. But that's what happens. And I see even in Sanghas that sometimes whatever, it's like Sister Tay was talking about how we come to the Sangha for refuge. We come to the Sangha oftentimes to escape. That the very things that we're trying to get away from, we recreate in the Sangha. that I've seen people coming from corporate America. They form a Sangha, and they have to have a 501c3, they have to have a board of directors. They set it all up in terms of a corporate structure. That's what we're used to. It's just a habit. And it's not a matter of saying it's good, bad, right, or wrong. It's a matter of saying, are we free? It's getting back to that initial question. Are we just bringing with us the same things that have caused us suffering? So I always look at my practice and say, am I happy? Am I free? And if I'm not, I need to look at myself. I need to look deeply and find out, where am I caught? And I think it was Stephen Jobs who had pancreatic cancer, and he said, dying can be one of the greatest gifts. He said, then you realize you're naked, you've got nothing to lose. There's nothing to lose. He would get up every day and say, I look in the mirror, and if I look at myself and say, is what you're doing making you happy today? And the answer is no, I don't do it. Ooh, that's pretty radical, don't you think? But that's what Thai tells us, right? A little girl asked him, what's the purpose of life? He said, to enjoy all the wonders of life. So that's our job. And at the beginning, I shared the poem from Thai. We're living in an ocean of fear. We need to join hands, allow compassion. We need to join hands in meditation, allow compassion to spring from our heart as pure, refreshing water so that we can be healing the wounds of life for ourselves and for our planet. We are transmitting and receiving energy every second of our lives. We can think that we're insignificant and we have nothing to do with the collective, that whatever I do is really not that big of a deal. It doesn't matter. And I always think of Mother Teresa when she said, I don't do great things, I do small things with great love. If everybody on the planet were doing small things with great love, we would realize what Thai put in his poem. It would be shaking the universe. The bright one-pointed mind, to retrain our minds so we can choose where to place them. We can choose not to waste time. We can see through the conditioning and the habits and be free. We can be fully available to help. So, dear friends, if you would not mind getting into just meditation for 1 second, I would like to offer a metta prayer to close.